Hi, it's Ileana at Awakening Cosmic Reality Show, and today I have Barbara Lamb with me. She is a hypnosis regression therapist. She has done past life regression. She has done regressions about alien abductions and also secret space programs recently. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to be with you. Yeah, so there's a lot to talk about, and I wondered which aspect you might like me to begin with. Well, I'd also like to add that, well, I've been a psychotherapist since 1976. That's a long time ago. And then in the mid 1980s, I had 5 years of training to be a past life regression therapist and have been continuing with that part of my work, which has been extremely fascinating. And then in 1991, people started coming to me who had had these very peculiar things happening to them, often at night when they're in bed in their rooms, but other times in other locations with unusual beings visiting them. Turned out to be the extraterrestrial phenomenon. And with one person coming in 1991, I thought, well, I can use the same techniques that I've used to regress people into previous lifetimes. So why not just use the same techniques for this, which turned out to be very, very useful, very functional to do regression work with, to help people to remember these unusual experiences that they usually remember just a very few moments of, and then they were sort of switched out of conscious awareness for the rest of the experience. So, anyway, after that first client came in 1991, I thought, oh, well, this has been very helpful for her, very successful. And so, if anybody else ever wants to come, that would be fine. And as it turned out, um, there have been well over 2,000 other people who have been coming for regressions for that very same reason, to find out about their unusual experiences that, as I said, they only remembered the very first few moments of, in most cases. So I have been doing that work, still am doing it, still have a pretty full schedule ahead of working with people. So the main thing, of course, in doing that kind of regression work is to help them to know what happened if they really want to know. And that's why they come to me. And also to help them sort of integrate it and feel more normal about themselves for having these highly unusual experiences. And of course, over the years since 1991, more and more people have been becoming aware that they too are having these extraterrestrial encounters. And there's more and more information out in the public, as you know. There are films, there are interviews, there are multi UFO conferences where this part of the phenomenon is addressed often. That is, what are the people's experiences with the beings on those UFOs, um, and television series and programs. So, I mean, it's, you know, more out in the general public. And yet, I still meet people who are very well informed, educated, intelligent people, and they have not thought that this phenomenon is real. I mean, they've heard of it, they couldn't help hear of it, but they just think, oh, well, I don't know, that sounds like science fiction to me. And actually, truthfully, that's what I thought all through the 1980s, that UFOs, extraterrestrials, fascinating idea, but it must be just science fiction. until it started coming to me in with certain clients. And I am totally convinced now, having known so many people who've talked about their experiences, and of course, having regressed so many people to their ET encounters, uh, I'm convinced that this is something really, really going on. It has been estimated by certain polls, like a Roper poll way back in 1999, that there were 5 million Americans who were having these experiences, plus who knows how many more millions worldwide, because it is a worldwide phenomenon. And by now, I think the numbers have probably increased. And of course, the polls interview a lot of people, but they don't interview everybody. So I suspect that there are many more people experiencing extraterrestrial encounters than we know about.
Do you know, like, if what types of ET encounters people have had, what types of species they've encountered?
Well, first of all, there's a tremendous variety of species, and uh, some people have estimated 89 species that one person knows about, somebody who's researched this greatly. And other people say, oh, there are even more than 90 different species that we humans know about. And that means species that do come to Earth and have encounters with human beings. So beyond that, of course, who knows how many other species may be existing in the cosmos. But anyway, 89 or 90 different kinds of species, that's a lot of different kinds of beings. And I emphasize this because, you know, when people have asked me, well, what do the aliens or what do the extraterrestrials do with people? That's a pretty complex answer because there are so many different types of beings and they have so many different agendas, so many different reasons for coming and visiting with people and taking people for short periods of time, usually an hour or two on their ships. So some of the agendas that some of the beings have seem to be more self-serving on their part. In other words, they're not coming to us because they're caring about us, but they are very interested in us. So some of these species of extraterrestrials are busy examining humans in different ways, examining different physiological systems that we have, a lot of our different kinds of functioning. They're interested in our emotions and our emotional reactions. And so they create scenarios that people experience on board the UFOs. And these scenarios are designed to evoke strong emotion in the person. And so the scenarios might be of some kind of earth disaster, like earthquakes with buildings collapsing all around, or tidal waves, or cyclones, or tornadoes, or these really natural disasters. And and the beings watch the person who's watching this holographic presentation, which looks very real, looks like it's happening right there on the spaceship, and yet it isn't. It's a hologram. And so the beings in the meantime are looking intently at the person to study what the emotional reactions are of that person. That's just one example of many, many things that the more self-serving extraterrestrials do. And then they study our bodies. They poke and probe and take samples of hair and tissues and fluids, and they study all those. So, in other words, they're scientists. They're very much like our scientists here on Earth who are studying animal life forms. And we do the same thing. We take samples, we study it, we look at the DNA. They probably look at the DNA too, most of those species. And so we consider ourselves just doing scientific study. And probably that's what those extraterrestrials think of themselves too. They're just studying these life forms, which we call humans. And we are of great interest to them because we are such a mixture of things. We have artistic ability, music ability, and do loads and loads of productions of those kinds of arts, and dance, poetry, writing. Oh my goodness. I mean, we have a huge gamut of talents that human beings have, and they're quite interested in that. And then, of course, we have a tremendous range and extent of emotions. And they are very intrigued with that because many of those species don't have much, or in some cases, they don't have any emotion at all. So they look at us in absolute wonder. Woo! At the reactions that we have and how we gear our lives so often around the emotions that we're carrying. So anyway, they study many, many different aspects of human beings, and they know that we have a lot of intelligence in various ways, like in some of the creative arts, that they may not be having that particular kind of intelligence. But then they know that we're interested in technology too, and science, and that we've been developing rapidly in technology, and yet they are way, way, way far ahead of us. But a lot of these species have come to Earth because they're very concerned about our nuclear capability. And actually, as far as we know, they started really coming with more UFOs and more occupants and more visits with people right after we dropped the first 2 atom bombs. And then they thought, uh-oh, I've actually heard from various extraterrestrials that one of their major concerns is that we humans will explode more nuclear weapons for one reason or another. And that not only will we ruin life on Earth, but the nuclear proliferation, the radiation, will go out not only through our solar system, but beyond our solar system to their planets. So they don't want to see that. That is definitely one of the reasons for interest. And it seems to me that once one group starts visiting human beings, that the news, shall we say, goes out to other species on other planets and in other spaceships about us. So after one group has come toward the beginning of this, then it seems like other groups came on board too, that they started visiting us. And as I have said, they seem to have their own agendas, which might be quite different than why the first people came, the first extraterrestrials came. So anyway, they keep coming. Seems to me that more and more species are coming the more years that this continues. So now we have a lot of this activity going on. People to know about this, even if, we've got enough on our plates with what's going on in the world. And many people just don't want to take that on as an extra concern or extra interest. And yet, the numbers of people who are very, very interested in this whole phenomenon, that number is growing rapidly, I think. More and more coming into the mainstream one way or the other. So I'd like to put in a plug for some of the beings. Many of the beings are really what we would consider benevolent. Some of them have really shown that they care about humanity and they care about Earth itself. They care about all life forms. And some of them have expressed great interest that we human beings will be evolving. And that means evolving enough in consciousness and outlook and attitude so that eventually we can have representatives to the great galactic federation. So there is this large council meeting out there called the Galactic Federation, or at least that's what we humans call it. And it's a great assembly made up of hundreds of different kinds of species of extraterrestrials from various parts of the cosmos. And it's kind of like our United Nations in a way, in that many, many nations belong to it. And yet we have on Earth with our United Nations, we have some nations that do not belong to it. They don't believe in the principles that the United Nations was formed around. And so they do not qualify for being members of the United Nations. Well, it's the same with the Galactic Federation in the cosmos, that the civilizations, the beings that believe in the tenets of that federation, they are allowed to be members. But they say there are some rogue nations which want to keep wars going and conquer one planet after another and so forth, take over and enslave certain species of extraterrestrials, that those groups are not allowed to be part of the Galactic Federation. But the benevolent beings would really like to see us be able to be part of it. And incidentally, a couple of my clients have been regressed to experiences of going to the Galactic Federation meeting. And it's been really fascinating to hear moment by moment their reliving of an experience of being there in this tremendous council. It's an enormous room. They describe it like an enormous amphitheater, but it seems to be inside a huge spaceship, as far as we can tell. And in this big round room, there are tiers, T-I-E-R-S, rows and rows of delegates from these different planets, different extraterrestrial civilizations. And because the species often look so different from each other, that they wear robes, each delegate wears robes with a hood that comes out a few inches beyond the face, so that as they're sitting there in this huge arena of beings, that they don't directly look into each other's faces, because even for them, the differences between some of them might be a bit off-putting or distracting to what they're discussing. So the humans wear these hoods that come beyond the face by a couple of inches at least, and the robes, so they all look the same as all of these other beings. and therefore they can much more objectively discuss whatever the issues are. And one of the issues discussed at one of these meetings that one of my clients went to as a temporary delegate from Earth, one of the issues was about the problem that long ago, many thousands of years ago, some of those species of extraterrestrials came to Earth and did some genetic work on some of the early life here. That is the early Neanderthal, and then how they evolved. And they did some genetic work with those really early humans and gave us the ingredients, shall we say, in our DNA, the ingredients of competition and aggressiveness and warlikeness, which of course has continued with some humans, many humans, throughout our human history. And now they are very concerned, the beings are very concerned about these ingredients in the nature of so many humans. Not all humans, of course, are that way, but enough have that genetic component for aggressiveness, warlikeness, greed, competition, and so forth, that it really messes things up for the rest of us here on planet Earth. So their dilemma, according to this particular galactic meeting, is that some of them gave us humans those particular aspects of genetics, and they would like to remove them. But the hitch is that there is a rule, an agreement, a principle out there amongst these beings in space to not interfere with any other species. So that means they have this agreement, this principle to not really interfere with the human race as a whole. And so coming here and doing genetic work with the humans whom they visit, that's a quandary for them. You know, should they interfere? And yet we have to admit that they do, some of them, some of the species, underline some, not all, do a reproduction program involving human beings and creating what we call hybrid beings, partly human and partly extraterrestrial. So that's a whole subject in itself. Would you like to have me get into that part of it a bit?
Yes, please.
Okay. And you know what, before I do that, I really want to say, because this is not said publicly very often, I think, that many of the beings who take people for these encounters are very helpful, very benevolent, and they do a lot of things to help people. They not only teach certain people whom they take many psychic skills, they sort of upgrade their consciousness, they teach them healing skills so that they can come back and heal other human beings. That is, the people can come back and heal other human beings. And then they themselves, the extraterrestrials, do a lot of healing of the human beings whom they take for these experiences. I mean, I have been aware in my regression work of many people who have been healed. They're healed right there on the spaceship, usually lying on a medical table with a group of beings around them, often beings of different types working together. And they are given healing methods involving various kinds of equipment that emit light. And it seems to be the light that is actually healing people. So I know of people who've been healed of cancer and drastic heart problems, liver problems, kidney problems, colon problems, cancer all over the body, including brain cancer, which is really tricky to heal, and many, many other drastic physical conditions that people have had. And sometimes clients that I have had some malady that was really very, very troublesome for them. And instead of being taken onto the spaceship, they were healed right there in their own bed, in their own bedroom. In fact, that very first client I had back in 1991, a young woman, she had a very bad ear infection. And it was just terribly painful. And she had not had the chance to get to her medical doctor yet. And so went to bed that particular night. And in the middle of the night, she woke up to realize that there were three very tall, thin, totally white beings in white clothes. They were right there by the side of her bed. And she had been sleeping on her back, and they rolled her over onto her side with the infected ear on the upper side. And then she could feel them doing something in her ear. And very soon she went on back to sleep while they were still there. But in the morning, she woke up and her very painful ear was completely healed by those beings. And she had been healed also of a lower back pain condition that had been going on for a couple of years. She had been healed by a blue beam of light coming from a disc-shaped craft. And she welcomed the blue, but she was frightened at first to see this blue being following her car. And then the car motor sort of sputtered out and died. She luckily had pulled off the road and ran into a field that happened to be where she parked the car right next to it. And this blue beam followed her and hit her in her lower back where she'd been having all that pain. And it got healed. She could feel the pain going away. How wonderful. And it stayed away. Okay, now back to the hybrid program. There are two basic parts of the hybrid program, as far as I know. One part is that they create hybrids who will be living on the ship and not coming to Earth. And they don't come to Earth because they're only half human and half extraterrestrial. They do this hybridization by taking eggs from a human female and then sperm from a human male and combining it on board the craft with some of their genetic material and probably their reproductive material. So they create an embryo, and then they take that woman again and implant that embryo in her uterus. So from her point of view, she begins to feel pregnant, not having known about this procedure having happened. And so she's pregnant and she'll go to a doctor and the doctor will confirm, yes, indeed, you're pregnant. Now, that may be not unexpected if she's married and they've been trying to have children, or even if she's married and they haven't been trying, but it's certainly possible that they could have conceived children. But sometimes a woman is absolutely puzzled because she hasn't been near a man physically for many, many months or even years in some cases. And yet here she is pregnant. So that's very startling, confusing to that sort of woman. Anyway, she seems to gestate the baby for a couple of months, usually less than 3 months. And then the woman is taken again, and that little embryo is removed. She's brought back home to go on with the rest of her life, and she is no longer pregnant. And she feels that she is no longer pregnant. And so eventually she might go to the doctor again, and he'll say, "Oh, no, well, you were pregnant. We tested it. We have it on ultrasound, but you're not now." And so they're puzzled. The woman is puzzled. The doctor is puzzled. And in the meantime, that little embryo is being raised in a tank of special fluid on the spaceship and gestated for the usual amount of time, another 7 months it would be at that time. And then when it appears that the baby is mature enough for birth, they remove that baby from the tank and raise that baby on the ship. So those hybrid babies do not come here. They remain on the ship or maybe on the planet of that species and for the rest of their lives. And then sometimes some of these beings have those hybrids combined with the reproductive material of another female. And that offspring then is 2/3 human and 1/3 extraterrestrial. And so that might go on, that combining with yet again another human for generations. But still, as far as we know, or as far as I know, um, those beings continue to live on the ship, and they're, you know, very intelligent beings and contribute a lot to whatever their agendas are. So that's one type. Now, there's another type of hybrids that I have been very privileged to get to know, and those are the ET human hybrids who are living on Earth. So this group of hybrids have a regular human mother, human father, uh, and they were gestated in the womb of the human mother and born here on Earth the way that the rest of us humans do this. But the difference is that sometime before conception or during life in the womb, their little bit of embryo or fetus, if it had developed that far, is combined with extraterrestrial material, and they become hybridized in that way. So I have been very, very privileged to know of 8 different hybrids living here on Earth who are excellent, wonderful people. Anybody would be happy to know them. And they are here as ambassadors for the ET species or combination of species whose genetics they have. So each one of these hybrids had a mixture of 4 or 5 or 6 different extraterrestrial species, all combined in them. And they keep having visits from those beings who gave them their genetics. And the visits are really welcomed by these people. They love these beings. And of course, they feel like family because they've got enough of their genetics. They're mostly human, of course, and they live their lives as human beings and they're accepted as human beings. But they've always felt different from the very earliest awarenesses that they had as very, very young children. They always felt different from everybody else. they felt different from their own families. And they would say to their parents by age 3 or 4, they would say, well, you're not my real parents. My real family is out there. And they would point up to the sky. And they would often be found as little children looking up at the sky and wishing that their real family could be with them. And they were always very happy when their extraterrestrial family did visit them. So they've had ongoing, very happy visits with these beings all of their lives. But the main thing is that they are here to do the benevolent work that those extraterrestrial species would love to see done on Earth. And basically, that work is to raise human consciousness, to help us evolve in consciousness, in spirituality, evolve in awareness and acceptance that there are many other beings in the cosmos, which still probably most people don't know or don't believe in, don't even want to believe in, but it's true. And anyway, they want to help people to develop to be much more altruistic and to serve each other's, serve all life on earth with kindness and compassion. And they want to help us evolve enough so that we can ascend into a higher dimension, which is a big program going on in the universe to help ascension of some other planets, other species, and definitely of planet Earth. And I think that when we see all of the wars and slavery and trafficking and so many of the really horrible things that are going on so rampantly on the Earth, I mean, I can certainly understand the desire of these beings to upgrade the consciousness of humanity. So these hybrids who are living on Earth and looking like regular people, acting like regular people, they are actually spending their lives in service. They're teaching classes, workshops, and so forth, writing books, writing articles, doing anything they can, having private clients to anything they can to help to raise the consciousness of the people whom they work with. So it's very wonderful, I think, to have them here with us on Earth. Beings who are of the first category, enough generations into the hybrid program, that they're enough human that they can be living here amongst us and cope with our viruses and bacteria and our customs, our way of life, and look enough like us, to be accepted in society. And I do not personally know any of those, but I do at least think that probably some of those do exist here, and we just don't know it. Now, another thing is that some of the extraterrestrial species are so human looking. Some of the Pleiadian beings, for instance, and on some of the other planets too, they're so human looking and acting that they have visited here. They've been able to cope here for at least short periods of time. And when you consider that, we have a world full of viruses and bacteria that someone from elsewhere would not be used to, I think it's understandable why they probably don't stay here very long. I don't think they could cope with it, even if they look like us. And yet there are reports of human looking extraterrestrials who are working even in various departments of our government and working in the aerospace industry, helping our engineers to figure out some of the really complex engineering problems for some of our flying machines and spacecrafts. So it's really a very interesting picture. We, I think, are much more mixed with other beings than we have any notion of. So a very interesting subject. So would you want me to go on to another aspect now?
Yes, please. I'd like to ask about what experiences you have had working with people, regressing people who have been in the secret space program, and what is that program about?
Well, I do certainly feel convinced there is a secret space program. I personally um, know only a couple of people who have been involved in that. Um, and because it's a secret space program, um, I don't think it's my right to report too much about it. But I will say that um, people seem to be recruited as children when they are children to a special training program. And they may or may not remember that when they are adults. But I've done a couple of regressions with a couple of people who went back to some of those earliest childhood experiences to be um, trained in various ways. They trained mentally mostly to do wonderful abilities to be telepathic and to be clairvoyant to a certain extent, clairsentient, clairaudient, all of the clairs of psychic skills, even having some healing ability. So from a very young age, like I think the youngest that I've been aware of is age 6, they're taken, they go to a regular school like other children, but it might be that after school they're picked up and taken to another location, not terribly far from home. They keep living at home, but they're part of this special program for special children. And they are introduced to this by saying that this is a special privilege. And the parents are convinced that this is a special privilege, that this is some advanced special training for their child. And so they agree with it. It's not anything that is going against the will really of anybody, as far as I can see. So maybe from about age 6 on up through the teenage years, this person, often a male, but even there have been some females involved in this, um, that they're trained with lots of different skills and abilities. And in the case of the males, they um, are given special foods and components that help them to be particularly strong physically. Um, so some of those go into our regular military service and serve for a number of years in that way. And some of them do other programs. Uh, some of them seem to go to other planets for a while and develop things there. That is something that certainly is not known to the public. Um, so some of them uh, eventually are coming out now with reports about different planets they have been on, different projects of kind of like helping to build uh, stations there, um, centers where life is happening, human life is happening, and will continue to happen. That's the idea. Um, so there's just an awful lot going on in that program, and I think that's really all that I can say about that at this time. But I think it's something that's coming out more and more, and we will be hearing more about it as time goes on.
Mhm. And if,
Okay.
yeah, and if someone wants to have a hypnosis regression concerning secret space program stuff, is that something they can come to you with to do?
I am not a good person to come to about the secret space program, in that I've only known and worked with 2 people who have been involved with it. I imagine there is um, information on the internet about the secret space program. Anyway, I do feel convinced that there is such a program, having known a couple of people who have been very involved and have been able to say so many details, but that's all very confidential
Yeah, of course.
information because they're my
Mhm.
clients. So there are people who are more known for that. One of them I have not met is Randy Kramer, and there's Corey Good, another one who's actually doing a lot of public presentations these days about his experience with the secret space program. So those 2, Randy Kramer, Corey Good, those are very good resources, and these um, brave people are really sharing information about this. So one of the interesting aspects of that, I think, that is that even though they're involved in programs and they are influenced so that they're doing these programs without their everyday mind being aware of it. In other words, the experts who are training these people to be part of the secret space program, the experts have really studied the functions of the mind, and they are able to work with or program one aspect of the mind that the person is very involved in without the other aspect of the mind being consciously aware of it. At least that's the best way for now that I can explain it. However, we all have a subconscious part of our minds, and the subconscious part records absolutely everything that we do or that we experienced in every way. Even the subconscious part of the mind records those things that happen when we are not fully conscious or even conscious at all, as in the ET encounter abduction experiences. So I would think that it's the same for the secret space program, that everything that the person participated in as part of that program has been recorded by the subconscious part of that person's mind. And not only is it recorded, it's all that experience seems to be stored in the subconscious part of the mind and can be retrieved when we ask for it and when the person is in a really nice, very deep state of relaxation, which we call hypnosis. So that brainwave state, very relaxed hypnosis, that allows the material from the subconscious part of the mind that we want to know about. It allows that to come forward detail by detail. So I think that's very fortunate that people who really want to know things, when they know or suspect something of these natures, extraterrestrial or secret space program, has been going on for them, it's wonderful that they can find out if they want to by this process of what we call hypnotic regression. So I feel very privileged to be one of those people who is doing this and has been trained for it and really appreciates doing it.
So if people are think they have been in the secret space program and they have inkling of it, can they come to you to have a hypnosis regression to find out more about that?
Yes, yes, that's true. People from the secret space program or people who know that they've had extraterrestrial experiences, or they have a lot of clues and reason to wonder why they have these clues and wonder what's going on that they might not be aware of. Um, yes, it's because somebody has good reason to think they've been in the secret space program or that they've had extraterrestrial experiences or whatever they want to find out about. Um, it's very, very helpful for them to have a regression. People also come to me for regressions for many other purposes, just regular everyday life experiences. Uh, like one woman had a very, very precious necklace given to her of, precious stones. And she went away for a vacation. She was going to be gone a whole month. And she was concerned. At the last minute, she realized she hadn't gone to the bank and put that necklace in her safe deposit box, and she wanted to hide it in her house. And she knew she was going to have servants come and water the plants and clean up the house and everything, do the lawn. And so she was concerned about it maybe being stolen. So at the last minute, the day she was going to leave for the airport for that trip, she hid this precious necklace, dashed out the door, flew away for her vacation for a month, and came back and thought, oh my God, where did I leave that necklace? I know I hid it, but where? And she looked and she looked and she looked and she could not find that necklace. Finally, she heard about me, came to me for a regression back to that last few harried moments before leaving for the trip and hiding the necklace. And in the regression, it came out that she had gone to the back of the deepest closet in her house, and there was like a woven bin of old sheets that were waiting to be thrown away, and she had stuffed it way down in that bin of old sheets, thinking nobody would ever want to look there. If they were looking for something, they look in all the drawers and so forth, but they wouldn't look there. And she had forgotten, as she was in such a hurry to leave for the trip, forgotten that that's where she hid it. But after the regression, she went into that closet, into the bin, opened up all the sheets, and there it was. So that was wonderful. So people come for lots and lots of different reasons about things that they want to know about. And for many years, and still it happens sometimes, somebody comes for a past life regression. And those are always really interesting. So the reason for people having a past life regression is usually that there is some issue or question in their life and they're wondering about, like, why do I have this terrible fear of heights, or why why can I not drive on the freeway, or why am I totally afraid of water and I've never learned to swim because I don't want to go in the water. Or it might be a totally different kind of reason. It might be, why am I so attracted to that particular person? And yet that person is married and I'm happily married, but I have this huge attraction to that person. It's really a problem. I don't want to be unfaithful to my spouse, nor does he, but we have this huge draw to each other. Well, it could be a reason like that. Anyway, we go back to the source of that feeling or that problem, if it's one of the phobias, for instance. or where did I leave my precious necklace? And we never know at the beginning of a regression, have no idea what's going to come up. But always it happens that what the images and the whole setting, the whole situation that the person has coming up in their memory in the regression, that turns out to be the exact cause of the issue the person has in this life. So, especially when a person in a previous lifetime dies of a trauma, a sudden traumatic death, that kind of trauma, whether it was a stab of a knife in the neck or breaking of the back or being enclosed in like a landslide of debris buried the person or whatever, sudden traumatic death, that symptoms of that event can very, very well carry over and be present in the person's life in this lifetime. And the wonderful thing is that when we go back and the person has that sense of reliving that lifetime and the events leading up to the traumatic death and going through the traumatic death in the regression, which seems very, very real to the person, and then on into the afterlife, that whole process seems to relieve whatever the problem is today. So the person who couldn't dare go into the water, or in the case of one woman, couldn't even have a shampoo with water coming down over her head and her face. The phobia was so severe because she had drowned in a past life. She had drowned from a very small rowboat, had fallen in the water and was sailing this small boat by herself, nobody else around, and she drowned. She went through that in the regression, and she'd had a lifelong horrific phobia of water being around her or on her. I mean, it was really a big deal to wash her face, even because that involved water. She finally found those antiseptic cloths she could use to wash her face instead. That helped a little bit. But anyway, after that, she found that she could take a shower comfortably and do a shampoo in the shower, the water pouring around her face, and could even go into her neighbor's swimming pool for a swim. So she had cleared up the phobia by the regression. So that's a wonderful thing too, that all of that is possible. And for past lives, there are just so many reasons. Even, I've had regressions done on me because I've been to a few countries where suddenly I had what I eventually came to call a spontaneous past life recall. Anyway, in Egypt it happened, in Peru it happened, in Greece it happened, in France it happened, that in a certain location in this life, I would just have this memory. It felt like this memory just emerging, a memory of being there in that exact place long time ago, totally different clothing. Even sometimes I was a male with very dark skin. That's quite different than now. and and in one of those instances in Egypt, it was a very tragic incident that suddenly came up in a tomb I was visiting. And it was so distressing, and it affected me physiologically so much that I just had to take a couple of hours by myself and process that whole experience, let the whole memory come up. And I grieved so heavily at what was coming up from that lifetime, that is what convinced me that we must have a whole series of lifetimes. Before that, I had not really thought much about or believed in reincarnation. But after a few of these experiences in other countries, and particularly that one that was so full of grief and tragedy, whoa. And I was already a licensed therapist, fortunately, at that time. And I was thinking, maybe there's some way to use this going into past lives therapeutically as a therapist. And a couple of years later, wonderfully, I discovered that there was an organization called the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies. Met the woman who had founded it and realized that there were a number of therapists already working doing past life regression therapy, that there was such a thing that I had been hoping to find a way to do. And so I went to their conference and went to their week-long training, and then went to 5 years of training to be a past life regression therapist. And that's been a really wonderful, fascinating, blessed part of my work. And now, of course, I've extended that into helping people to experiences in this life with extraterrestrial beings. And by the way, very interesting to me that some people whom I have regressed to extraterrestrial experiences have discovered in regression that they themselves in previous lifetimes had been extraterrestrials. Like one woman I regressed, I did a series of regressions with her, and she went to lifetimes in 3 different extraterrestrial species. So, in other words, she lived on other planets as one extraterrestrial species way back, quite a number of lifetimes ago. Did that for a few lifetimes, and then her soul decided that she wanted a different kind of experience. So she incarnated or reincarnated in another planet, another species of extraterrestrials for a few lifetimes, and then reincarnated into a third different extraterrestrial species. And that was the most recent extraterrestrial species. And in regressions to experiences that she had as one of those beings, the main thing that she was doing in the last one of those lifetimes was learning how to heal human beings, abducted human beings. And so we went to a very detailed regression of exactly how she was being taught as an extraterrestrial and taught by the other extraterrestrials how to heal the abducted human man. And before she started doing the regressions with me, she had suddenly left her corporate job. She had a good job, was doing very, very well in her mid-30s. And suddenly she left that corporate job and all the benefits, all the retirement plan and everything that she had with it, to become a physical healer. And she didn't know about this extraterrestrial heritage at that point, but she did know that she was continuing to have extraterrestrial encounters. That's why she came to me. But we found out that she had been inspired to do the healing and trained to do the healing when she was in one of her extraterrestrial lifetimes, and that carried over into her doing the healing in this lifetime. I worked with her back in the 1990s, and she's still doing healing in a healing clinic in California. How wonderful. Yeah.
So can I ask you, how can people reach you if they would like to do a session with you and experience a past life regression or hypnosis?
Okay, if anybody would be interested in reaching me for a regression for any reason, past life, this life, extraterrestrial, for any purpose, any reason, they can reach me at my website. That's the best way. And I think the website's pretty easy to remember. It's Barbara Lamb regressions.com. Barbara Lamb, Lamb, regressions.com. And there's a feature there on the website where you can type in that you want to contact me, and that shoots right over to my email. And I will be sure to answer you, although there might be a delay a bit because I do get extremely busy, but I will get back to you as soon as I can. Barbara Lamb regressions.com. And I would like to mention something that's very exciting to me in this whole field of interest of extraterrestrials, and that is that a wonderful woman named Mary Edwards and I have just published a book for children about children's extraterrestrial experiences. And this book is available now on Amazon.com in hardcover or softcover or Kindle. So that you just type in the name E.T. Friends in Space. E.T. Friends in Space. So the book is for children, but the idea of our doing it is that adults would be probably reading the book to some of those children. The book is it's about 18 different kinds of experiences that real children have had in real experiences, according to those who have worked with me, experiences with extraterrestrial beings. So it shows 18 different kinds of things that children have experienced with the extraterrestrials. And it's done in a way to familiarize people that these things go on, people who don't experience them, and to validate for people who have experienced these encounters, and even for the adults who might be reading this to a child, it may trigger some of their memories if they have had these experiences too. So we want the whole field of people being visited by extraterrestrials to be more known, because it's happening so much and so many people are so quiet about it. They don't have anybody to talk to about it. And to sort of normalize that they are normal, even though they are having these experiences. And the emphasis on the fact that even if people are scared at first, that many of these experiences are wonderfully benevolent.
Can I ask, like, why do some people have implants from extraterrestrials in their body? Why would that happen?
Oh, implants, that is a very good question. Yes, many people who experience extraterrestrial contact do eventually realize, one way or the other, that they have a little object put in their body. It might be in their arm, it might be in their cheek, it might be behind their ear, it might be in a tooth, it might be on their leg, in a knee, in a foot. I mean, implants have been found all over. Now, what the person would see, if anything, if an implant has been put in, is just a little a little tiny lump on the skin. And I have felt that lump on many experiencers, as we call them, many of their bodies. And usually the implant feels like there's a little BB that small, a little BB under the skin. Now, the implants are put there by the extraterrestrial beings in some of those encounters. And they seem to be for a number of different reasons from what we can tell by the people who have them. Like one woman has one up in her head, and she said when the beings were going to come that night, that sometime during the day, she would feel a little vibration coming across her forehead. Another person felt that they would get certain ideas dropped into their mind when they would feel a little vibration somewhere, even in the arm or wherever. They'd feel a little vibration in the implant, and then suddenly there'd be a new idea as if it popped into their brain. Sometimes we call this being downloaded with information. Others, people feel that the implant is mostly like a little chip sort of thing so that the beings can track wherever they are, because whereas they mostly are visited in their home by the beings that they go away on a vacation, even out in the mountains or the wilderness for a camping trip, that they are still located there. And they think it's the implant that has been like a tracking device. And some people feel that the implant is more for the beings knowing about their life, knowing another, not that it's theirs in particular, but knowing about human life by getting to kind of experience through the implant what the person is doing. And a couple of people have said they have implants behind their eye in their head, and that they sometimes feel sensations in that implant, and they feel like the beings are looking through their eyes to see the world, as we see it. And that helps them to know more about the world and life on Earth. And there may be other reasons too that we don't know about, but it is very, very frequent that a person who experiences extraterrestrial encounters eventually discovers that somewhere in their body they have an implant. So when an implant is in a bone or near a bone, and that bone is x-rayed because maybe it's fractured or broken or something, in other words, whatever the x-ray is for, sometimes that will pick up a little object. And the doctor won't know what it is, and the person doesn't know what it is. But if the person is an experiencer of extraterrestrial contact, the person will probably say, oh, that must be an implant. Otherwise, people who don't know about that just wouldn't know what that little object is. So I've been present when Dr. Roger Lear did implant removal surgeries. He and a couple of other doctors did these in Southern California when he was alive. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he removed at least 17 different implants from different people on a series of occasions, not all on one day. And I was present for a couple of those and actually watched the surgeries, watched these objects being taken out. So there are a number of different kinds of implants, probably according to the different kinds of species that put them in there. And some of them look like very tiny crystals, like about the size of a grain of rice. And some are rounded and seem to be a combination of metals. I know of one that was round, BB size, but a combination of fibers, with one of the strands being a metallic strand, the rest of them being strands of fibers, all put into a ball shape. So anyway, we have different kinds of implants, and they're different shapes, but they're all very small, and they're put in under the skin. Now, one of the techniques that these beings have is that when they put an implant inside the body somewhere, they seem to be able to heal over the skin completely, so that even the next morning, the person doesn't notice that anything's been put inside because there's no scarring. And the reason we think that is that there's no rejection of the implant, which of course is a foreign object, foreign to the body. The reason it does not seem to be rejection is that before the implant is put in, probably on a previous occasion, a little scoop mark of skin is taken out from the person, maybe from their leg, their thigh, or their calf, or their upper arm, or someplace. And that little bit of skin, which is probably about 6 layers of skin deep, not quite to the blood, but that little bit of skin is taken by the beings and probably is adhered to whatever the implant is. And then that is implanted in the person. And because it has some of the person's own skin wrapped around it, the object is not ejected by the body. Very, very clever technique. So if a person sees a little scoop mark somewhere in their skin, it'll only be about 1/4 of an inch long and not wide at all, then it's worth thinking about, maybe you too are having these experiences, and the scoop mark is going to be put around, or has been put around, an implant that you have in your body.
Thank you so much for joining me on this wonderful interview. Like, you've answered, like, just by talking about it, you answered a lot of the viewers' questions that I already kind of had. And the implants was the most repeated question. People are like, I noticed something on my skin, like poke marks or those scoop marks, and they couldn't understand what's causing that. So that
Right.
question is was repeated over and over again in the requests.
Well, good for those people. I really honored they're wondering about it. And also maybe many people are wondering about other kinds of markings on their bodies, because that happens with almost everyone whom I know who's been an experiencer. And so sometimes a person will wake up and there'll be a little perfect triangle of what looks like little pinprick marks. They're not bleeding, but they look like little pink pinprick marks in a triangle, or in a perfect circle, or a perfect crescent, or a straight line, an inch or so long. Or sometimes they'll have a bruise, like a perfect triangular shaped bruise. Well, that's not the way most of us have bruises, that, when we bump into something. But these experiencers very often have a perfect triangular bruise. It might be right over the navel, or it might be near the navel, or which is suggesting that eggs have been removed from the ovary, from that person. Or there might be marks on the back, like a vertical series of pinprick marks, or just like scratches I saw recently in a woman on her back. Or there may be marks under the upper arm, where the soft tissue, or they could be really anywhere, and of all kinds of different sizes and shapes. I even saw on one lady, on her forearm, there was a straight line scar, white, just a white scar that wasn't there the day before. And of course, she woke up and thought, what is that? And we did a regression on it. And we found out in that particular case that the beings had taken a certain kind of vein from that part of her arm. And it was the material in that particular vein that they didn't take the whole vein, they just took a little segment of it, sewed up the rest. And that particular material in the human vein was something that was saving the lives of their newborn babies, some ingredient in our vein. So she didn't mind when she realized that's what it was. And then we found out in our experiencer group that I had for many, many years, found out that her husband on the opposite forearm had exactly the same looking straight white line scar. And we never did do a regression for him about what that was for. But interesting that both the man and the woman had that identical kind of scar, which was useful for saving the lives of their babies.
It's very interesting and fantastic the way ETs are able to use some of our material, genetics and other things to help to save their own kind. So I've not heard of that before. So that is very interesting. So like this answers a lot of the questions about abductions, about why the ETs sometimes take things from us. It's not like malicious, it's to help them in some way as well.
Right. In fact, there was another woman, she happened to be a woman from Holland. And in her, so I only saw her for that one regression. But in that regression, she was taken on board a ship, and a being who reminded her of a very tall beetle. So that was not comfortable for her at first. And the being seemed to be doing something. He seemed to be with a little instrument, just pricking her here and there on her body. And she noticed that with his pricking her, there was a little drop of blood each time. And he would prick her, take the blood and prick her again, put it in the vial. And I asked her, would she like to know why he was doing this? And she said, yes, of course. And she asked him, and he said, you have a component in your blood which is very helpful for our species. And she didn't ever find out what that component in our blood is. But once she realized that that was actually saving the life of some of their species, you know, that put a different feeling on it for her. And he actually thanked her. He said, thank you very much. You don't realize how helpful your blood is to us. And we're not harming you in any way, but you are saving some of our lives. So with that having been said, and her understanding what the pricking was about, that put a whole new look on it. And she was really okay with having contributed that to saving lives. Whatever seems to be, you know, kind of a invasive procedure done on the person without any explanation, you know, that just seems very, very unwanted in many cases, very intrusive, invasive, and yet they can find out what is being done. And when they find out that what was being done is either to help them in some way or to help the person himself or herself in some way, it certainly becomes much more acceptable that these things are being done. So, for instance, one of the things that a lot of people have objected to, and I can certainly appreciate that, is the proctological exam going up the rectum. And we don't like that when we have it done by earth doctors, and people certainly don't like it done by these other beings. And but it has been explained to a couple of my people by the beings that this particular exam tells them more about the entire human body and all of the systems of the human body, more than any other exam that they could possibly do. So when they find out from this exam that there's something wrong, like let's say with the liver or with the lungs or the thyroid or pituitary or whatever, they will either tell the person to get that particular organ checked back on earth by their own doctor, or in many cases, they will go ahead and heal it themselves. And they will usually tell the person, we are healing your heart. So they might be doing procedures that seem very strange to us and we don't understand. But once we're told that we're being healed of something, and we actually are being healed, and we realize that later back on Earth, then many people are grateful for that interference. The healing would not have happened if it had not been for them doing it.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with me. This has been great. I really appreciate you coming on the show for us today.
You're very welcome. I'm very pleased to be with you. It's wonderful to find a group of interested people, and more people are becoming interested. And I think that's a very good thing.
Oh, it is. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. And you too.
Bye.
Bye.